Testing. Okay. It's moving everything closer. Hi everybody, and firstly, I'd just like to apologize for the wait. Basically, I've had some issues connecting to Facebook Live. I've had trying to stream to 2 different platforms at once. So I've just given up with Facebook. I don't know what's going on. It just won't connect. But it's good to have some people watching here. If you have any questions during this demonstration, just let me know. And I actually wanted to keep this to about an hour, but obviously we've got, kept you guys waiting for a little while, but I'm going to get started. So I'll just talk you through the sketch that I've put down essentially. Now the reference photo I'll post after the class. I've also got it in the Facebook group as well if you want to have a look at it. But essentially what I've done is just put in real basic details of the boats here in the front. I've got some of the little buildings, essentially this tower at the back there, that's really important for you to get that one correct. In terms of these buildings, if you sort of look just around the middle section here, all these buildings here, the main thing you want to keep in mind is just the rooftops. So looking at the reference picture, it's a little bit hard to tell, especially when the photo's small, but you've essentially got light coming in from the left-hand side and it's hitting the buildings. So you've got this sort of yellowish color from the sun just hitting the roofs, and we've got maybe a bit of an orangey sort of red color on the rooftops. But really the rest of this stuff here, we can eliminate down and just make it into one big shape. So think of all these buildings here as one large shape in the background, which we're going to cut around with some darker paint later once we get in all the light rooftops, things like that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly finish off this sketch, but have a go at sort of sketching. I'm not sure if you're kind of watching and trying to keep up, I guess, with what I'm doing, but you can always watch over a little bit later if you want to figure out, if you want to spend a little bit more time on the drawing. But I'll just show you what I've done. So we've got this little house here in the front, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start putting in some of these smaller houses next door as well. So I've got one here. Remember, you don't have to get these exactly as the reference photo. All you have to do, just make sure you've got the larger houses in. So you've got these ones here, there, the tower. That's really important. This is a scene in Croatia, by the way. The town, I can't remember the town. It's I looked it up before, but it's really hard to pronounce, and I've now forgotten it. But I'll post the reference later so you have a look. But essentially, you can see what I'm doing. I'm going into these little houses, picking out a few that I want to emphasize. So, this one here, for example, is important. You're going to have a bit of light hitting that side of the building, and then this side you can kind of color down with the darker paint. Over this side here, I just look at these rooftops as triangles. So I've got something like that there. And, we've got the top of this roof. It's you can barely see what is actually going on in this sort of section. But main thing is just to leave a little bit of these roofs showing. Bring that shape down. Just rectangles, essentially. Just look at them as rectangles on their side. This just forms a guide for me later when I go through with the watercolors, essentially, so that I kind of know which areas to cut around. And you don't have to do this for all of the houses and things like that. I just like to leave a few in here like this, just to remind myself. Otherwise, I end up coloring the whole thing in. So just a few more in there, and make it up as you go as well. As long as we've got some of these ones in the front, we are pretty much good to go. Even in here, there's a few rooftops and things, buildings. love the color of these buildings as well. They're kind of orangey yellow. We've got a bit of sort of Naples yellow in there, but it's all just really quite sandy, warm colors running through this entire mix. So it doesn't matter all that much, to be honest, what colors you use, as long as they are kind of warmer colors. And I'm planning this out as we sort of go along as well. So I'll sort of look at the sky, and we're going to make that blue. And then if you've got a blue sky, then we've got these warmer colors. And, you know, if you contrast those warmer colors with a bit of the blue from the sky, the blue in the water, you're going to have these really, really nice sort of contrast. So anyway, we're going to get started, and I'll keep this pretty loose and quick. So I'll talk about the colors and the brushes that I'll use. So I've got a bunch of brushes that I got from ZenART supplies. They sent me over these a bunch of these brushes a while back from their black tulip set. So just using a bunch of these are kind of synthetic brushes. Mainly I'm going to be using the flat brush and a couple of the round brushes, maybe the rigger. Those are pretty good for getting in small details like the masts. I've also got a larger, it's not a large, but it's a general mop brush. And I'm going to use this to get in just the general colors on the page. So it's really important to use a large brush where possible. And the size of the paper I'm working on, it's about A3 or about a quarter sheet. If you're wondering the size of the paper. So anyway, I'll get started now, and you know, if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll check the chat and continue on. So what I'm going to do, I'll actually bring the palette a little bit closer to the left so you can see what I'm doing. And for this sort of part as well, I tend to stand up and paint, or even just stand back, because all I want to do is get in some real basic colors, keep it very, very light. We don't want things to be super dark at this stage. We want to make sure when we're using watercolors that we're layering it appropriately. So essentially getting all the light colors in first, and then we go in a second time, get in the darker colors, the shadows, and then perhaps a third time later. So during these layers, you're waiting for it to dry. But the first layer is super important because you're just getting in those nice soft shapes. It forms the basis of your entire painting. So if you get that right, the rest of it is you know, a lot easier, and you can relax. So hi Joanne, nice to have you here. You from the Facebook group, or whereabouts are you from? Anyway, so let's get started. So this is my palette, and I've got a whole bunch of colors here. It's just messy, and it looks like, you know, it's complete madness. And one of my students, when I have a lesson, every time we have lessons together, she's always laughing at the palette and thinking, you know, what is going on here? But yeah, I probably should clean it. Anyway, so I've got some Naples yellow, a bit of this stuff here, which is yellow ochre, and I've also got a little bit of this orange here. Okay, this is what is it? It's a pyrrole orange. And I've got a bit of lemon yellow. So really, I'm not paying too much attention as to what exact sort of yellows and stuff we have here, but I'm just having a look to see how we can vary those yellows on the page, because we don't want to color all these roofs and all these buildings in the same yellow. And if we look at the reference photos, there's so many variations of hues in here. So we want to keep it as interesting as possible. When we're simplifying details in watercolors, we want to do that. Fantastic. Great. You found the link, Joanne. It's really annoying. I couldn't stream to Facebook. I don't know what's going on. It worked all the previous times, so apologies for that, but good to have you here. And so anyway, let's get straight into it. I think I'm talking too much. So I've got a bit of yellow ochre, and I'm not even really mixing it up all that much. So just picking up a little bit of that yellow ochre, dropping it in to this tower here. Okay. And I'm going over the entire tower, and then we're going further down. And this is an important bit as well because you want this area to kind of mix in with the sky wash later. So I always keep a little spray bottle with me as well to just spray this area so that it doesn't dry, so I can get a softer edge. Okay, so anyway, going in, bit of yellow. Let's pop in some more lemon yellow in here. I've got a bit of burnt sienna, tiny bit of burnt sienna. Drop that in here, especially for the rooftops. I find that tends to look nice to have a little bit of that burnt sienna, a little bit of English red in there. You know, I can pop in, even for some of the buildings, a bit of this Naples yellow down the bottom. What we're doing is just getting in some basic colors for these buildings. And, you know, we don't even have to color in parts of it. We can just leave some of it white as well. So it's kind of a bit late for that, but, you know, maybe some areas like that roof here, you know, I've just cut around and left it white. See, so there's different ways that you can apply light on these buildings and to have maximal contrast. I know some people love to use, you know, just the white of the paper. So just carrying this wash down, and as you can see, I'm doing very little mixing on the palette. I'm letting this all mix straight on the paper and taking a bit of time to cut around these sort of rooftops, things like that, getting in some different colors, mix that into the roof, a couple of the roofs here, like that. Play around to this section here. Let's go more warm on this side, just a bit more yellow in that section. And we also have to be a little bit more careful as we move down because we don't want any of this color going into the boat. So I'm trying to leave them white or even with the kind of creamy color on it. That will be fine. So now I'm going to swap to a number 8 round brush. Number 8 round brush here. Hey Lynette, how you doing? Whereabouts? Which state are you from in Australia? Hope you're not in New South Wales at the moment. I hear they're not having too much fun. We were kind of in that position a few times in Melbourne, and yeah, don't ever want to go back to that again. So anyway, I'm gonna go down further down here, and you know you can add in a little bit of darkness as well into these sections. The main thing is just keep these, you know, varied tones in here. So just dropped in a little bit of darkness. That's probably too much. But what I want to do is just focus on cutting a little bit around these boats and things in here. So bit more of that yellow there. Leave a bit of that white space for boats, cut around the tops of them. Okay, and really don't need to put much detail in for the boats at all. All you have to do is just leave, it's almost like this rectangular shape at the bottom, and then you've got a square on top, and that's it. Got a boat. So remember, you're layering details as well, so don't feel like you have to, you know, when you're sketching it in, have to get it looking super detailed or anything like that. Let the brush do all the work. I've found a lot of the time I spent way too much of my efforts actually drawing, and you know, ends up being colored in paint anyway. So looks like I've pretty much got in most of the colors for the buildings. You know, as you can see, I've got a really nice range of colors floating around in here, but you're keeping this very, very light. So I'm talking about, you know, Joseph Ẓebuković, one of my favorite painters, he sort of talks about it in terms of consistencies. So tea and coffee, that kind of thing. So you're keeping it a very, very light and transparent mix so that you can still see those pencil marks going through. So all these edges are still going to be slightly damp, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of blue, so just a bit of cerulean blue here, okay, and I'm going to drop that into the sky like that, okay. And actually, you know, the sky is pretty light, so I'm going to keep it. Oops, should not have happened. Dropped a bit of paint in there. Cut that off a little bit. Continue on. Okay, and I just want to get that to blend a little bit with the building. So just the edge of it like that. So we have a soft edge for the sky. Okay, so I just want to do that and work around these other buildings like this. Okay, nice soft edge. You can leave a little bit of white on there as well. Okay, and I'm just going to move that across the page. Okay, if you notice, if you go on and it's way too dark, what you can do is just dilute that on the page. Continue it on. I'm going to just put a bit of color here on the side. Lift off a little. I don't want it to be mixing in too much. There we go. Right. And with the edges of these buildings where it meets the sky as well, you can see the area kind of where it kind of starts melting and bleeding into each other. You want to have some areas where it does blend into each other, and some areas, such as here, where you've just left a little bit of white, just to vary things up a bit. I mean, it's really up to you how you want to do it, but that's just the way I, after a few years, decided to do it that way because it makes it a lot, I think for anyone, a bit more interesting. So just carrying this cerulean blue down all the way to where this boat is down the back, and just mix this up. Just down. Again, allow this to mix a little bit in areas. Okay. Remembering to cut around this little boat right at the back here. Okay. Great. So that's the sky pretty much done. Now, what I want to do is also add in a bit of darkness and some extra kind of details for the clouds. I'll just be picking up a little bit of purple, and you know, you can use any type of color really. If you use a darker color, you know, a bit of neutral tint, that kind of thing, and just drop that in like that. Just make sure, the most important thing is to make sure that mix is slightly thicker than the actual mix that you've got on the paper. So you don't want to go in with way too much water, because that's just going to cause a lot of blooms and not going to look nice. There's different ways to do clouds. I know some people do use sort of bloom effects for clouds, but I think for beginners, it's best to just sort of stick with some of these wet and wet clouds and use a consistency which is thicker than what you've got on there. So trying to use as little brush strokes as possible to get in some of these clouds. I don't want the clouds to be a huge sort of feature in here, but you know, having some darkness in the sky, just some darker clouds, it also brings out the lighter areas of the sky. That's why I'm doing this. Oh, there's a bit of white here. Okay, so I think those little clouds, or these larger clouds out the back, they're looking quite okay. And, trick is just to kind of get in as enough of them, but not go overboard. And I'm so trying to be so careful with it because if you put too many in there, it starts to look unbalanced. You can use a smaller brush. So I've got a little number 8 round brush here, and here I'm just going to dab the brush off a little bit, and we can drop in a little bit of color down underneath here. So kind of implying smaller clouds further down the page, that kind of thing, like that. Okay, so it's it's just a lot easier to get these smaller shapes in if you've got a smaller brush, obviously. So kind of just depending on the size of the shape you're painting, you just got to adapt the brush to that so that you don't go in with too large shape. Okay, but at the same time, if you can paint in a shape with a larger brush, always use the larger brush. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going to wet this kind of area down the bottom where the water is, and I'm going to pick up. Firstly, I'll go in with the round brush. I'll grab a number 10 round brush, pretty large one, and just going to go in and get in a bit of this watercolor. Now, checking out the reference picture, you can tell that the water is actually a lot darker than the sky. So we've got to obviously increase the strength of our mixture of watercolor plus water. So, also what I like to do is just make the area at the back a little bit lighter. It helps with the sense of depth in your painting if you make the back of the water pretty light and the front of it darker. So I'll show you how we'll do that, and we'll add of course the ripples in the front. So got the number 10 round brush, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to mix up some bit of cerulean blue with a bit of cobalt blue, just to get a darker sort of mix of blue, a different mix of blue anyway. Okay. And it's kind of watered down, as you can see. It's it's darker, a little bit darker than the sky. But I'm going to go down, and we're going to cut around the shapes of these boats as well. So I want to leave some space there. Right. Let's have a look at this. Done. Drawing this in, drawing that boat in a little bit. So cut around that. All I'm doing here is just putting some color. And if it blends upwards a little bit, that's okay too. So kind of into the buildings, that kind of thing, not a problem. So cutting around that boat and, adding in some more blue here. I'm going to go stronger underneath this boat. That sharper sort of shape area underneath. Continue my way across the page. Let's also get in some of these areas here. There, that. Some points I'm kind of making it up. Okay. I'm just leaving the white of the paper for the boats because I want to get in some color for them later. So that's why I want to leave them white color. Easier. So going down, and this side will get in as well. Left hand side. This boat is kind of on. And really best practice would be you're doing what I'm doing up here, but you're doing it at a time where this area is still essentially wet in the building. So I had to go in with the spray bottle just to help it blend a little bit better. And because of that, you can see now the sharpness of the boats in the background. It's just not as sharp as I'd like it to be. Here, that's sort of what I'm looking at, but you're getting some soft edges. Well, got to be careful with too many soft edges or any kind of man-made object or shape. If you've got too many soft edges there, it's going to be hard to define it. And my painting style anyway is pretty loose, but you've got to know what you're looking at the end of the day. It's too loose, it's going to be difficult. So anyway, that's pretty much what we've got here for most of the water section. I'm going to give this a little spray from a distance, just with my spray bottle. Run out of water. And I'm just going to go in now with a bit more blue. So moving further down, I'm just going to pick up darker kind of blue here. This is Prussian blue. It's kind of similar to mixing up with this darker sort of blue. Going down and carrying this section water all the way down the page like this. Okay. Just like that. Trying to get this in with a few brush strokes, not around too much. Here we go. That's all of it in. So this is the point where you really want to pay attention now, because it's really, in terms of getting the ripples of the water in, you've got to do it all at this point while the paper is still wet. So really a couple ways to do things. You can do it while the paper's wet, and then you can wait till later and get them when they're dry. So I'll just show you both ways how I do it, and to combine both of them for better, more interest. So what we'll do first is I'm going to do the ripples a little bit further down the back. So picking up a bit of neutral tint. Okay, it's just basically just a grayish color. And I'm mixing that with some of the blue. And I'm going to go in and just drop in a few little, let's have a look. You can use even a smaller brush. I've got a number 4 round brush. Okay, number 4 round brush. Just picking up some darker paint, some darker blue paint mixed with some neutral tint, but not too dark, just a darker sort of consistency. And we're just taking that across the page in little sections. And you're making these ripples very small at the back. Okay, this some that bit more irregular there. I'm doing the ones at the back first because I'm just worried they're going to dry, and then just want to get that bit there first. Dropping that color in here, little ripples. Once you touch the paper, just leave it and continue on. Even if you get a funny little stroke that wasn't what you intended, I think it's really important to stick with it and continue along. If you try to fix things up, it's going to look too put together, too forced. So these are sort of soft sort of shapes, can make some that are a bit more jagged, and something like that as well here. Okay, so just carrying this on that, and when the paper is obviously wet, you can do a lot of this stuff. Just blends in very nicely. Don't have to pay all too much attention. And look at the way that I'm holding my brush as well. I'm using my entire arm to move, which is really important to get these larger sort of strokes in this. Okay. Got some nice little calm ripple effects over the surface of the water. Okay. And you can go through and basically just keep on doing this until you're happy with the end result. I think as well, what I'll do is add in just a couple of darker strokes down the front with a larger brush. So the larger round brush here. Just mix up a bit of blue, a bit of purple. And I'm just going to drop in just some larger waves. Important to do this because it it helps with that sense of depth in your painting. Some darker waves down the front. It just look darker and larger waves down the front. It basically just brings the part of the painting forward. Okay, so I think that looks all right at the moment. I'm gonna leave that. I don't want to start overworking it. And what we'll do next is essentially I'm just going to give this a quick dry with a hair dryer, come back again, and we'll finish off the final step. Okay, fantastic. So this is now all completely dried off, and in my opinion, I think the hardest part of the painting is over. Now we can kind of relax and pop in the kind of shadows here on the right hand side of the buildings. And I'm going to show you how to connect up those shadows, just basically get this in one large shape so that we can imply this larger kind of background buildings and the light sort of hitting the left hand side of the buildings, get a little bit of color into the boats, maybe pop in some reflections, a couple of masks in here, and finish off the painting. So let me just check the chats. Okay. It's a shame I couldn't get onto the Facebook. A few people in there. Anyway, what goes on? So this next section here, we're going to start working on the buildings. I've got a smaller round brush. This is a number 4. You get a number 4 to 6 round brush. And I'm also going to be using a number 8 round brush. Might pick up too a little flat brush because I think this will help to kind of cut around some of these buildings. Okay, but what I'm going to do is go in to the left-hand side, sorry, the right-hand side of these buildings. So to imply basically a little bit of shadow. Okay, so I'm going to go in first to this tower. It just looks like the most obvious thing to do. And in terms of colors, look, I don't really think all too much specific colors. I just tend to go with things like complementaries. So you've got a yellow here, so I might pick up a purple color, use as a shadow with a bit of, a bit of gray mixed in there, for example. Okay, so, you can do that, start off like this. And another thing, just want to make sure it's not too dark. So, just a watery mix of this color. Start off at the top. We've got a figure or something. I don't know what it is. I think there's a statue or something at the top there. I'm just going to go down, get in the side of this tower like this. Okay. What we're doing is just putting in a bit of darkness on that right-hand side of the building and bringing that down. Okay. This here, and carrying it further down the page. Pick up some more paint, drop some more in. Well, continue on. It's really important to leave some of that yellow well. And also get some little dry brush strokes. Okay, there's a area of the house here. I don't know what it is. This building here, which is actually lighter. Put around that. Leave that bit there. Lighter down the bottom. You've got windows here side of this tower. Oops. Just get that little indications of some windows like that with the same kind of paint, and like just using this to sort of join on to that right hand side of the tower as well. So we've got some consistency here in terms of the paint. I'm not having to go back afterwards and try to figure out what kind of paint I'm using, what consistency of paint. So anyway, that's one side of it done. We're going to continue on downwards, and again, I'm just going through the palette and picking up some dark paint. It doesn't really matter what it is, okay, as long as it's just kind of like a cooler color, I find works very well. Okay, carrying that down, this, okay, and remember these are kind of rooftops or something like that, so we're just leaving some of these white, okay, not white, but I mean this warmer color in there. And we've got bits and pieces, we've got rooftops and things in here I haven't drawn in before, but I want to imply. So again, I'm just trying to go in a little bit softer in that area. Okay, I'd actually redo this top bit up. It's gone in a little bit too light, so I'm going to drop in a bit of more of that color in here, just in some areas, while I can darken that down a little bit, and I hope that dries off okay. And over here we've got some trees or something here, so we can just I can put in a little bit of indication here with some sap green, bit of this other green. I don't know what it is, but it's, you can mix your greens up and use a bit of brown in there as well. So just getting in these sort of background shapes of these trees like that, and I'm using them to kind of cut around the tops of those buildings here as well. There, and I'm joining that on that area. Okay, I'm being pretty quick, trying to do this, quick so that it doesn't look too stuck on. Okay. Go. Tree. Going further up like that. Right. Continuing down, we're blending these shapes together again. So all this area here is still wet, this section. So I'm going to go down and just cut around some of these buildings. I'm going to look at some of them here as well and look at how we can get in some shadows. So we might think here's a shadow outside of the building like that, drawn on there. Got maybe another rooftop here or something. Bit of darkness behind like that. They were just trying to leave out some of these areas of yellow in there. And remembering the shadows are all going to appear on the right hand side of these buildings. So bit of shadow there. This one's going to join on here like that. Essentially, as long as you leave some of these bits and pieces, the yellows and things like that on there, you're going to be completely fine. Just cut around, use these bits of yellow to imply detail and things that are going on in here. Let's try a bit more blue in here. I might use this larger brush as well. Just a bit. Yeah. There's another rooftop, for example, something there. Another rooftop here. This section here is going to be darker. So again, just indicating that light source coming from the left-hand side. That, okay, shadow in here, bit of darkness in here. Just doing my best to pick up bits of color in here, darker bits of color anyway. Cut around some of these shapes, apply things. That, okay. What else? A bit of light sort of coming through like that there. And notice how I'm just joining everything up. I'm not painting an individual building. I'm connecting the shadows onto each other, each of the buildings, and just using it to create a larger shape like that. Okay, and we'll do the same thing for the left-hand side as well. Might even want to mix up a few other colors in here. We might mix up a bluish sort of gray. Then I could pick up a bit of red and drop that red into this side, and we can make a kind of a warmer gray as well. That bit of that red section. Blue coming in like that. Some yellow, this section here, soften the edge off a bit. Okay. Cut around the house, this sort of section, rooftop, and there's actually another house or something behind there, which I'll get in, because it helps to actually frame this roof here. Got that sort of thing going on. There we go, a bit of a shadow underneath the roof. Continue along and leaving two areas, darkness in here, light cutting around, well, bits and pieces, that, joining it all up on both sides. Okay, kind of hard to tell what I'm even painting at the moment. This is going to be darker here. So again, that's a building with a bit of shadow on the right hand side. As you come down as well, I just try to actually make this area down the bottom a bit darker. And the reason why is that it just creates more contrast. Changes around these shapes a bit too. So, okay, that's another one. just like that. What have we got here? More buildings. Just using these rectangular, creating these sort of rectangular shapes, and you know, if you look at it and don't look too close, essentially look like little rooftops, sun. So continue going across. That's one of the houses and things in the front as well. There we go, another bit of darkness there. And we've got to be also mindful that we're not going in too dark to these areas. Just pop in a bit of darkness behind that section, like okay. A bit more here. There's a bit of darkness on this side of the building. Well, just finding spots like that. Might drop in a bit of darker paint. That. Always trying to continually change up the tone and consistency of the paint in these areas just very, very slightly so that it all doesn't look the same, because you know, in nature there's so many different tones and so many different hues, and the way that you can sort of get that picture across or apply that is to just vary colors that you very, very slightly. And you know, when I go back to the palette, I just pick up a slightly different mixture of paint. Helps. Okay, so you know, rushing, trying to do this bit quickly. I'm spending way too much time on this, I think, so I want to get it over and done with. This side here is actually a lot of light hit the sides of those buildings, so I'm gonna go a bit softer here. Let that blend in a bit more that side. I don't want to disturb that as much. Later on, I'll go through again with a final wash, get in a little bit more darkness in there. That should be good. I've forgotten this building. So this larger building here, just pop in that little shadow underneath the roof like that. Okay. And what else have we got? We've got some windows and things here. I'm going to just add in a few dark strokes running through. There's a window, a door or something like that. Another door, another one. Just pop in a few of these here. What else have we got? We've got a few kind of window shapes here as well. Pop some of those in. Okay, there's a darkness or shadow underneath that. Let me have a look. What else can we do? I think that's all right for now. I'll probably go back into it later and get in another bit of shadow underneath. And same with the little windows and things like that on these houses and stuff. I reckon I'll just wait for that all to dry and we'll go to the final layer. What I'm going to do as well is we're going to start putting in some colors for these boats. Now, they're all white in the photo, and you can leave them that way and just add a bit of darkness on the right hand side. Another thing you do is just add in some color. So I'll do that because I just like doing it. But if you have, essentially, if you use some kind of brighter, warm colors, complementaries essentially, like oranges and things like that, you can get some very interesting looking areas in here. So I'm just going to pop in some warm color, a bit of this orange like that. Okay, and a bit of color there in the back. Go, finishes about. Just putting in a bit of color. I'm not worried about details or anything like that. Just some color in there. There is a window here as well. I can get that in. Little thing. Oops. Goes on. here we go. This actually goes on a bit further, so sorry about that. And underneath the boat, I'm going to get in a little bit of darkness here too. Kind of like when you're painting cars, having a bit of that darkness at the bottom helps to anchor the boat to the ground, the water I mean. So let's go through and mix up some other colors, and let's get some of these boats in. Okay, so there's one at the back, a little bit of color. It's really a grayish color, and I've popped in a bit of blue on there. I might use a bit of yellow for this one here, for instance. So just drop that in like that. There. Okay. For the window up the top, why not let's put in a bit of blue. And we're not worried too much about details at the moment. We just want to get in some of the colors for the boats, just so that we eliminate all that, just get rid of the white on the paper, so keeps things interesting. Boat here, got, I think, in some places here. Color that. A few more here. Well, in the background, that just drop in some color, a little bit of color. That this is just a gray color, and another one here that I popped in before. Again, just this kind of purplish color. That bit of color there for the windshield, and some at the back as well. So the ones at the back, all I'm doing is just just a little stroke of color like that. Because the stuff in the background, you don't want it to overwhelm, because it is in the background after all. So there's a couple of windows, things like that for that boat. It's actually a really large boat, but it doesn't still pop it in like that. Got this one here, which I think I'll go with just some grayish paint. Pop that in like this, just to get a bit of color in there. That okay, and what I'll do now is actually start getting in some of the really dark colors. We're talking about there's a little bit of shadow underneath the boats, and I'm going to really emphasize these shadows more. So I'm just going to go in and get those shadows in, and then we're going to go in and pop the smaller windows onto the buildings as well. So this is really the last step in getting in all the rest of those details. Hi, Anne and Lloyd. Thanks, and nice to have you here. It's yeah, I had a lot of trouble trying to get the Facebook live to run, and I was yeah, I was trying to fill out a few times before, for like almost 20 minutes, and yeah, it was the first time it didn't work. So at least the YouTube live works, but yeah, apologies for that. Yeah, next time I'll probably get in a lot earlier to see if I can get it to start up, but it just refused to connect. Really weird. First time that's ever happened. So yeah, anyway, you can sort of rewind it and go back and watch anyway. I'll post this back in the group. So I'm going to go in and, again, like what I was saying, just start putting in a little bit of darkness underneath these areas of the boats. And a bit of color there, just to anchor it to the ground. Okay. Ground. I keep saying the ground because I'm always painting cars and things like that. So we're just putting in just a little bit of color, a little bit of darkness at the bottom, especially for these ones at the front. It does make a difference. And I'm going to go in and just add in a bit of darkness now. Okay, so now the ripples, these sharper ripples. Now I was talking about this before. When you have a combination of these soft ripples and sharp ripples, it looks a lot more interesting, right? So I'm going to go through and I'll show you how to do the, you call them, these masks as well. So kind of get the reflection of the mast, and that makes things look a lot more interesting actually. Oops. Whereabouts are you watching from? Is it Anne or Lloyd? Watching Anne or Lloyd Holden. Whereabouts are you guys in the States or you in Australia? So I'm gonna go through and I'll show you what we'll do for this one. It's hard to concentrate at the same time while I'm talking. I'm still getting used to doing these lives, and actually the first few times I did them, I'm getting better, but I was pretty nervous. It just, you know, trying to get all the computer, everything to work, and sometimes you get messages and things, and I'm trying to concentrate and make it look good as well. So it's a learning process. I tend to paint a lot more fluidly when I'm, yeah, just not on camera, I guess. But this is another fun thing to do, and I think it's good to sort of step outside my comfort zone a bit, and it's nice to be able to share some tips with people who might find it helpful. So anyway, got this mixture. I've got a mixture of darker blue, a darker blue with a bit of neutral tint. And you can just use a cobalt blue or a ultramarine blue. That's completely fine. And we'll go through and pop in some of these reflections in the water. So something like that, back and forth. I'm going to get more darkness in this blue actually. You can use neutral tint for that. A little bit of that darkness underneath that. And what I'll do as well is probably get in a mast just coming up here, okay, extending all the way up almost to here. That. Okay. And I'm just using a number 4 round brush, but I'm going to swap now to a little rigger. Geez, where is it? Here it is. So, yeah. And the rigger is pretty good for getting in smaller lines and little details. So, we've got little bits of the mask that sort of runs up here. And don't be afraid to sort of skip areas as well. You don't have to draw the whole thing in. So skip bits and pieces, and it actually looks like the sun's catching onto part of these masks and lines and things like that. So what I'm just trying to do here, and the great thing about the rigger as well is that you can then kind of go in here and start popping in little details. Just sort of looks like there's more stuff going on. There's one of these, I don't know what they're called, sort of little floaty things connected up to the boats. So I'm just popped in a bit of that here into the water, the little reflection or something like that there. And what else have we got? We'll get in a few more sort of lines down, vertical lines, and really just tiny bits of details on here. These little bits of railing and stuff like that in here that's just going to give this boat a little bit more detail. And the thing with when you've got objects and boats and anything that's closer to the front, you just got to put in a little bit more effort to add in some smaller details, so it just comes forward more. So there's another boat there, and we'll get I'm actually gonna go in the more neutral tint in here, just getting in some of these of the boats, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. This one is a bit forced. just want to use a few little strokes like that. And what you do is that you kind of just combine them, join them onto each other, like so that they look. So it's not just the reflection. There's tiny little ripples in between as well. I tend to use some of these dry brush strokes too. Okay. And then we'll get in this kind of reflection of the mask. You kind of hold the brush right at the end. You just do this sort of squiggly sort of effect. That's it. That's it. Don't overdo it. And we go down. I'm just going to add in a few more sort of darker strokes in here. Join on the boat. Okay, bits of smaller waves and ripples, that kind of thing come through here. That one I'm pretty happy with, and I'll just leave that pretty much how it is. We can get in some more, a little bit more darkness at the back. That for the window, maybe a bit of shadow or something underneath there. Back here, make it look like the light's coming in on the left hand side. Okay, we're going to go for this one now. Darken that area down the bottom, and there we go. We're just going to get in a little reflection beneath the boat. This, and I think I'll pop in mast up through there. Just drag that down. Perfectly straight. Doesn't need to be. Join that up. Go. Another one, another mast. And again, you just want to get some ripples that are in the middle, kind of this area, joining these boats on together. Away. Continuing on, and you know, even some smaller strokes at the front, I mean, larger strokes up, just something like that even keeps that pattern, essentially that wave pattern. And I've got this is some larger ones. I didn't actually mean to go that dark. I'll have to just deal with it. Join that up. A few little strokes up. I don't want to overdo it. Just a little bit there. Okay. Bunch of these other boats here. So again, just going in, putting a little bit of a reflection underneath them. The further back the boats are, the smaller you're going to need to do the reflections down the bottom. So don't make them too go down too far. Okay, so here we go, a bit of darkness under there. That's almost too dark. Where's my small brush? So just soften it. Yeah. Remember with watercolors as well, it always dries lighter. So if you go in too dark, don't panic away. Lift things out and try to lift things out and change it around, because actually that can stuff it up even more. So often, you know, you get a funny sort of rogue stroke of color going through, and you just got to leave it and think, okay, we'll see how it looks once it's dried. Unless it's something that's really out of place, I just let it stay there. So, you know, I'm following the kind of light pattern again. I'm just imagining a bit of light coming in from the left to the right. So, you know, a bit of shadow on that right-hand side of the boat, and joining on underneath like this. Yeah. The kind of smaller ripples and shadows. So, you know, as you can see, these smaller, sharp ripples contrast with softer ripples in the background. And overall, what you end up getting is illusion of extra detail, even though there's not there's not much going on in there. It just looks like there's something happening, and the water's moving underneath. Okay. Here we go. Here's another boat there. Just pop in a bit of color there and darken that off. Oops. Just use the finger. Well, if you can lift off in bits and pieces too. You know, I'm gonna pop in a mask for that one, just real quick, and join that on there. I think this one I should make a bit higher, a bit taller. That. Great. Let's have a look at some of these other ones. So this one here, yeah, we're gonna need to darken that off at the bottom a bit. Okay. A bit of shadow section. This one too. It anchors them to the ground. If you don't have this bit of darkness underneath, it makes it real difficult to suggest that the boats are actually on the water. So, okay, just soften that edge off a little bit. All right, let's get in some small windows and things here. Just back of the boat here, we've got some darker spot again, connecting shape on like that. So important to leave some of these white areas on. Actually, you tend to want to color everything in when you first start painting in watercolors, and unlike oils, things like that, oils and acrylics, you got to leave the whites there. I mean, you can use gouache as well. I tend to do that at the end too. I find like when you leave the white of the paper on there, it just looks so much fresher. But it does require a lot of cutting around, planning, and something to just practice when you're starting out in watercolors, because it is difficult to kind of plan. Anyway, let me just show you how I'm going to do some of these buildings, the windows and things like that. So we can, you know, for example, we'll just use this one here in the front, and here we go. Got just a window like that. Dry off that brush. Here we go, another window. Just really putting these in quickly, and I can get that perfect sort of nice dry brush stroke. Just drying that brush off on the papers, on the towel. Drying my paintbrush on the towel so that it kind of has this also dry brush stroke. Not too obvious, doesn't stick out all too much. Go a little bit of that window. We've got more windows here, and you know, just because you know the reference picture might have, for instance, more windows on there, doesn't mean you have to put them in. So you're trying to make this your own in a way, and the painting should read well by itself. Shouldn't have to go in and make it look like the reference photo. And I really admire people who can sort of do that. But I like to put a bit of my own into these paintings, and not stress about doing things exactly as they appear in the reference. There's funny looking windows on here. Look at these interesting three windows here. We're just going through and we're finding bits of detail that we want to draw out. Not even perfect. If you look at that, I've made some small mistakes here. But at the end of the day, as long as you've got that general feel, that general style in your painting, fine. I have some things too detailed and other things super loose. Finding pieces to just put in. Yeah, what have we got here? There's actually these little vertical windows. Just something down the page. There's so much detail in here. I mean, honestly, I probably should have picked something. Probably should have picked something a bit less ambitious. I'm gonna go through and pop on a few little windows like that. There. We're pretty much almost done here. I mean, there's little, these are just some small trees or something that indicating like that. Go back into the boats. For instance, think of getting in mast or something for this boat. There's already one there, I think. Really just getting in the super dark colors in so that we make sure that the shapes at the front really out more. These dry brush strokes really help to just bring the shapes of these boats forwards more. It's too dark, you know, again, just lift out a bit more here. That. This one here has a bit of white coming off the top. Just put in a few little birds running up the top. Just little V's in the sky. That. Especially near the top of this tower, I think it could be. There's a bit of white on the paper that I've left over. To use that as a highlight for the birds. What I'll often do after the demonstration, I'll go through and refine things a little bit more, just spend a bit of time detailing, you know, a little bit more of the painting. Another thing to do is if you've got some gouache, a bit of white gouache, it really helps to get some of that in for some highlights. So talking about things like the masks. Some of the masks are kind of a white color, or areas that bowed out the back. So this is an opportunity to pick up some of that opaque gouache and just drop that in so that we have some of those whites back. That's why I'm saying you don't always have to, you know, make sure that you've got all those whites preserved. You can just wait until later and get them in afterwards. For example, even for this one here, if I wanted to get in a mast or something like that there, I can just pop that in like that. Okay, do one here as well for this. That. Reclaim highlights. A bit more white on some areas of the boat that you want to, in a little bit of indication of light running through. Yeah, that's pretty much essentially it. You know, normally I'd spend a bit more time going through and detailing these buildings in the background. I think I can probably do a much better job if I gave it another go. For a first go at this scene, I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. If you have any questions or anything, just let me know in the chat, or let me know how you're going if you're actually painting along as well, so I can answer your question, go through anything else. Otherwise, I'll probably end this in a few minutes. What I'll just quickly do is get in some softer shadows. So using a bit of the grey, just a little bit of grey, very watered down grey, I can go through and just a little indication like that of some of these shadows coming underneath the buildings. That's always an additional bit of detail that helps. And it only works, this light little glaze like that only works well when you let that previous layer dry. So don't go in too early, otherwise you're not going to get this sharp edge there for the shadows. Okay. Your time on the first wash is the most demanding because you got to have everything done, sort of timed and done. Thinking, what else can I put in here to make it look interesting? Bits and pieces as bars and the far back. Bits of deep person. Trying to get a bit more darkness running through in some areas to vary these tones up. Actually, one of the things I've done is that I've just, that area at the back, I really wanted it to be more darker down the bottom. It's a bit late for that now, but you know, this is another thing you can do. Go through and pop in some smaller shapes and things in here. Stuff I like videos. Thanks for the compliment. I think one of the things I find with almost every artist, especially yeah, it's always a thing where you wonder, are you ever have you ever achieved what you wanted to achieve in terms of, you know, where you want to be in art and techniques, and there's always something to improve upon. And you know, there's guys that I look at, you know, 𝗪𝗙𝗙𝗦𝗧𝗏, 𝗪𝗘𝗙𝗏𝗪𝗧𝗏, you know, the old masters like Turner, and sort of look at the stuff that they do, and it's incredible. I'd sort of look at them as inspiration and something to sort of strive for. But it's really nice to get those compliments, and you know, for people who are watching, and just to know that you know, I'm doing something, helping. So I'm not like babbling a bit too much, and I'm kind of fiddling around with too many of these details and things like that. So yeah, look, that is essentially the painting. You know, at the last stage, you know, this pretty much is the last stage, but you can go in afterwards and just tighten up little bits and pieces, or you can just leave it essentially as it is, and you know, that will be fine. But it's really up to you how you want your painting to sort of look. I mean, sometimes having it more loose and like this kind of thing, it has its own allure. Anyway, I'm going to finish this off. Thanks for watching. Apologies for the stream on Facebook. I don't know what to deal with that, but I'll see you next time.